Yo, 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 what's up, Black Factor family? We back. We in the building. It's your boy Brian Forbes. And y'all, we got a real special guest coming on today. Y'all gonna enjoy this show. If you are an educator, if you're interested in education, if you know anything about education, if you want to make sure that your grandchildren get the proper education and the right information, you're gonna want to tune into this show. Right off the top, let me just start out by saying don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to hit the like button, don't forget to hit the share button. The subscribe button is what keeps us alive, y'all. Let's make it do what it do. You know what I'm saying? Also, do not let me forget my oh so smooth radio family that are tuned in to the simulcast. Thank you all for tuning in, and we are about to get off into this thing. So, right quick, before we go too deep into the whole educational thing, right quick, y'all, let me just say, I hope things go the way they're supposed to over here in the Ukraine. I don't want any of you to become confused or mistake what's happening over there as being something that doesn't have anything to do with you. It has everything to do with you. But let me first remind you, do not be so jaded by gas prices that you forget that you could possibly be like those people and not have you'd be trying to figure out what happened to your house because it got bombed out and you can't go anywhere and you don't have a job anymore and that whole thing. So let's keep that in mind and keep those people in our prayers and, make that thing, hope that thing goes the way it's supposed to. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to jump straight into this. We have our special guest tonight, and we're going to be discussing education as it pertains to black folks in America. And we have a very special guest on the show, my friend. And as a matter of fact, y'all have met her before because we did a show where we talked about her restaurant and we talked about entrepreneurship, and she's been here. But now she's going to come back in the professional capacity as educator. So, with that said, I want to introduce to you my friend and yours, Dr. Crystal Cross. You know what? That's got a hell of a ring to it. Dr. Crystal Cross. Crystal Cross. Did people do that to you when you were growing up?
Well,
Did they
Cross
hit you with
is
the
my
Crystal
married name, so
Oh, okay. What
my
did they do it to you as an adult?
my
Crystal
maiden
Cross.
name was Hyde, so it was like Crystal Hyde, Crystal Hyde.
Well, see,
Crystal
now
Hyde.
you done messed up because now I'm going to be teased. I'm going to be like, Crystal Cross. I ain't going to call you Crystal no more. I'll be like, Crystal Cross, what's up? And ladies and gentlemen, by the way, Crystal Cross is the owner, proprietor, entrepreneur who owns Chicago Bite right here in San Antonio, one of our Chicago cuisine restaurants. And thankfully we have that because I love the Italian beef that she makes. Oh my God. So Crystal,
Yes.
we could go down the entrepreneurial rabbit hole, but we're not going to do that tonight. We want to talk about the education part of your life. Now, right quick, give the audience some idea as to what your background looks like in terms of that. I mean, you a native Chicagoan, ain't that right?
Absolutely.
Hey.
Absolutely.
You know what they say about the Chicago public schools? They produce great fruit, you dig? So what grammar school did you go to? Now I'm being nosy, I'm curious.
Okay, so I went to Beasley Academic Center on
Really?
52nd and State. Absolutely. Yeah.
I know what Beasley is.
Yeah,
Okay.
everybody know about Beasley.
Yeah. What high school did you go to?
Curie Metropolitan High School.
Oh, you was out there in them sticks. Okay.
on Archer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, that's real interesting. So now you furthered your education, and let me ask you something. Were you interested in being an instructor from a young age?
I
or-
was.
Really?
I think it started at like second grade. It may have started at 2 years old, but I know second grade we had to do a project on what you wanted to be when you grow up.
Wow.
And I always used to play with my dolls and teach them.
And you were the teacher. So
I was the teacher.
you literally fulfilled your dream of being in education.
I did.
That's pretty good. I only actually know. Let me add you to my list. I only actually know probably three. I can count them on one hand. The people who wanted to be something from a very young age and actually made that come to
became it.
fruition. So
Mhm.
that's a beautiful thing. When you can live out your own dreams. Most people can't say that. So
Right.
that's a fantastic thing. So you graduated high school and then you went where?
To St. Xavier
Okay.
University. Well,
Okay.
first actually I went to Blackburn. It's
Really?
in yeah, it's in Carlinville, but
I've heard of
it was
Blackburn.
like four hours away from Chicago. But I
Okay.
absolutely hated it there. Oh, so I transferred myself after my first semester and went to St. Xavier. It's in Chicago.
Okay.
It's on 103rd and Central Park or Pulaski.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and finished my bachelor's degree there.
Okay. And then you went on to get your
Master's
uh-huh.
at Saint Xavier. No, Saint Xavier already. Lewis University.
Okay.
It's in Romeoville.
Okay.
So I went there for my master's, and then I went to Concordia University for my doctorate.
Well, check you out.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all. I know a doctor. A real doctor. Straight off the south side of Chicago. Don't play no games.
Southside.
Southside.
Yeah.
So now, I want to jump straight into this conversation. Give me your thoughts on, because I mean there's so many different areas or different ways we can approach this conversation, but there's a lot of topics, a lot of subject matter here, and there's a lot of questions that I really have for you. We probably won't cover them all, but tell me how you feel as an educator, as a black woman in an education system. What is your takeaway from knowing the challenges that black people, particularly black young men, have, and what the way the system is set up today?
That's a broad question.
It is. I want you to take it and run with it, do whatever you want with that.
Well, first of all, let me say this, that I feel like education starts at home. I'm going to say that
Absolutely.
first and foremost, that education starts at home. And so us as parents probably need to do a better job at, educating our students and fighting for them more and being at the forefront of their education. So I'll start by saying that. Now, the educational system is just simply unequal, especially, in Chicago, at home. Students have to be tested into a lot of different schools.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
I actually had to test into, when I went to CVS, Chicago Vocational, way back in the 80s or late 70s. I had to test into that school.
And part of that is quite annoying to me.
Why do they do that though?
I don't know, honestly. I think that's the way the system is set up, and they want, I guess, a certain quality of students to be able to go to a certain quality of school. And so, which makes it difficult for, some students who, may struggle with testing, but they are actually brilliant students and brilliant minded, and, they have a different level of what they can bring to the table.
Yeah, because all people, I mean, just in general, not just children, but all people learn differently.
And the thing about the testing, though, testing into a school, is that at the end of the year, the students all take the same test for, like the Iowa test of basic skills, but is now, right, exactly. So, but it's now, so the whole state of Illinois used to take that test. And I think the students in Iowa used to take that test too. So back in your day, in my day, when we did have to test into schools, the students still have to test into schools, but back then everybody was still taking the same test.
Right.
But you had to test into a certain school to end up taking the same test. That just doesn't make sense to me.
It really doesn't. And you know what? Now that you mention that, it takes me back to thinking. I remember in grammar school, I can remember there being, like okay, for example, like let's just take an 8th grade class. There was one group, and they were all in one class who tested higher than another group who were in a separate class. It was like you knew you were in the smarter group if you were in this class over here.
It was the same way at Beasley.
Okay.
It was the same way.
I think that was across the entire
Beasley.
education system in Chicago, I think. And I find that to be a little bit disturbing because to me, it plays into something that I want to get into in this conversation as we move along. it's sort of like, and I don't want to call that particular thing a dehumanization, but it creates a divide, and in those divisions, it allows children to develop levels of low self-esteem that that create other problems. I think. Am I off base with that?
Absolutely not. So, I'm gonna dib and dab a little bit because of my experience
Okay.
with different things. But last week we just came off of Black Restaurant Week San Antonio,
Right.
right? And so I was, of course, I post the restaurant all the time. At least every day on every site that I can,
Right.
post
Right.
on in San Antonio and around. And so I was posting about, Black Restaurant Week San Antonio, and a person commented on one of the posts, well, what happened to White Restaurant Week?
Huh.
Or what, or what happened to
Yep. Here
Asian
they
restaurant?
come.
And so I was like, the problem, with that is, if you want us to not be segregated, or if you want us to not be separated, then why is that question on everything? When you go to the doctor, they ask you what your
Yes.
race is.
Yes.
When you fill out on your driver's license, they ask you what
That's
your
right.
race is. And so I know that's a little bit off topic, but if
Not
we're
really.
if we're going to want to be not segregated or not separated, why do we continue to ask those same questions? We shouldn't. And so part of the problem, in the education system and in the school system is, they still separate.
Uh, you know, and you're absolutely correct. But this also plays into part of what we're going to discuss on this show today, and that has to do with, see, one of the things about racism and separation and segregation is that, and this is something that a lot of people don't recognize, or if black or white, and point out when necessary. It is that racism is not a black problem; it's a white problem. That's a white folks' problem. It has nothing to do with us, really. It has to do with their bigotry and hatred and misunderstandings and misgivings about other people because of what they've been conditioned to believe. But in that, we suffer because
Because we didn't enslave anybody, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
No,
they
go ahead.
like they
Go
you
ahead.
know they took us. We didn't take them.
right. And so you hear
We
stupid
wasn't
stuff.
bothering nobody.
That's
Like,
right.
were we bothering? Did we ask for that?
Right.
Did we ask to be enslaved? Did we ask for that type of segregation? No,
right.
we weren't. We can't help where we were born. We can't help, what the world that we were born into.
Absolutely.
Nobody can choose their color, their race, or any of those things. So we didn't ask to be segregated. We didn't ask to be separated. We didn't ask to be black.
Now, and that absolutely on point. And the thing about all of that is that when like you hear people make stupid statements like the one that you just described,
Right.
Well, what about White Restaurant Week?
Make
Well,
one.
like-
That's what I wanted to say.
Right.
Like,
Well,
create
but see,
one.
but now
We
you do
created
realize-
this.
You do realize that if they did that, see, this is the gaslighting that I can't stand.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would be considered racist for saying something like that, because we know they always use the term white power as a form of oppression. So to say anything white this or white that now is going to make them look exactly what they are. And the
Right.
fact is, we just came off of Black History Month, which, by the way, I have a problem with, only because there should not be a Black History Month. There should only be history.
Right.
But this goes into what we are dealing with the educational system. So, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you this now. I was going to dig into it later, but I'm going to go ahead and get after it right now. Critical race theory. We are dealing with these conservative white or white identifying politicians who have fear-mongered up on society, white society, to say we don't want that taught in our schools. If you ask 95% of them what critical race theory even is, they cannot even define it.
Right.
So the fact becomes, this is an opportunity. See, they don't want the history to be told the way they lived it, because it's not only an embarrassment, it shows how barbaric they actually were and often are. that part, if they're so proud of their heritage and they're so proud of their history, they want you to leave their monuments and statues all up. But let's talk about the people who
Teach
these
the
monuments
facts.
right, the behaviors that these
facts.
monuments reflect. Let's talk about those people.
Right.
See, if you start talking about those people real history, now you're in critical race theory. Now you're in actual history versus the BS that you've been feeding students for millennia.
Right.
So, I know I went off on that one. I'm sorry.
No, it is perfectly okay. And honestly, I'm not really a political person because I just don't like to dig too deep into that type of stuff, because at the end of the day, I just want to live my life and make my money and take care of my kids and go on vacation. I don't and I feel like I was taught what I needed to be taught. I know about Black history and I know about what was done to us. And Black history should actually be just history, because it's world history. It's our nation history.
Absolutely.
So that's what I think. And that's, how I feel about, that aspect and that part, that it should just be history. And that's one of the reasons why I actually joined Black Restaurant Week, because it started at the end of Black History Month and went into Women's History Month. So it wasn't just during Black History. It started the very last day of Black History Month. So I don't know. I just think that the students should be taught everything, and they shouldn't be taught bits and pieces of what people want them to know. And that's the problem with the educational system, is that every time someone else get into office or someone else takes over, they think that students should learn what they think they should learn, and opposed to it being a collective agreement on what's best for the students to actually learn. And that is one of the reasons I feel like God pushed me out of education, because it just wasn't going the way. When I was a teacher in Chicago, my students learned. They learned about all type of things, all type of stuff. And that's one of the differences between teaching in Chicago and in Illinois opposed to teaching it here, in Texas. So in what I found and what I experienced rather, is that in Illinois I had free reign to teach my students what I felt like they needed to learn.
Particularly in Black communities. That's one thing I do give Chicago education, the Chicago public school system, credit for, because they allowed students in Black communities to thrive in those communities and learn that history. And
exactly.
They didn't handcuff the teachers.
Exactly. And that is, and another difference is that you really, in Illinois, in Chicago, you really have teachers that are passionate.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
About what they do.
They
are right. And they so in Texas though, you have, teachers who have gone through, alternative certification programs and, things like that. So they were in banking, or they were in this, or they were in that, and then they decided to go an alternative route. So they spent like 1 year, working on this, certification, not even, actual degree. Most of the teachers in, Chicago or Illinois, I never heard of an alternative certification program for, teachers. There may be, but I just hadn't heard of it. All of the teachers that I encountered and experienced actually had 4-year degrees in education, elementary education or middle school education or high school education, or whatever, whatever route they chose, to take. And so that gave them the passion, because you're not spending, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 on a degree for 4 years, and that's not something that you want to do.
Right.
And so that's the one thing that I appreciate about teaching in Illinois, was that it really gave me the opportunity to really teach my kids, and I was able to teach my students at their level and bring them up to where they needed to be. We were able to go on field trips. I was known in my buildings as the field trip queen, because I would take field trips and take the whole school on a field trip. All of the teachers would be like, your next field trip, you let me know, I want to go, because I had those kids all over the city. And I'm talking every year, I was going on at least a field trip a month, if not more, if I could. But here in Texas, the school that I was an assistant principal for, they told the teachers they could only go on one field trip a year. And I was like, why y'all think these kids need to be in this building? It's so many things that they can learn outside of this building.
Right.
Going places, seeing the world. That's really how they learn. Not sitting in no classroom flipping no pages of no book.
Right. Well, here's a quote. Malcolm X once said, "Only a fool would let their enemy teach his children." As an educator, what are your thoughts on a quote like that?
Only a fool will let their enemy teach their kids. You have to be careful of what you place in front of your babies.
Ooh, preach it.
I think that's what I hear when I hear that statement, and that goes back to my original statement. As parents, right? We have to do a better job at educating our children
From the cradle straight
to the grave.
Yeah.
So that not only means us teaching them, that means protecting the schools that they go to, monitoring the teachers that are in front of them, monitoring, the assignments that they're being given, being an active partner in your students' education. And that is, like I said, down from the schools that they attend, the teachers that they have, just
Right.
being an active partner, because I've always felt that, and I've always told my parents, you are your child's first advocate. I don't care what happens, what is said, what is done. You are your child's first advocate. I remember I had a student in 5th grade, and he had failed. I think it was 3rd grade. And he was struggling, but I told his mom, look, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and he's not gonna fail. He's not gonna fail 5th grade, and he's not gonna fail again. But another thing that I want you to do is continue to work with him, so that by 6th grade he'll be able to take his test in 6th grade and achieve far more than what they expected. And then you can go and sit down with that principal, and that principal will have no other choice. If you show the principal the data, that principal will have no other choice but to put your baby in his grade.
Right quick, let me ask you this, and you actually partially answered it. What steps can parents take to advocate for their children? What are some of the steps that you recommend in terms of what a parent should do, even a grandparent, because we know a lot of times people are growing up in under different circumstances, especially in Chicago. What can a parent do to make sure that their child is getting the best possible results from the system and from their instructor?
Being an active participant. So, like, I did already say that, but I had an answer in my head, and then it went out as you were speaking.
It'll come back when it does. You go ahead and do your thing.
Right. So I think
you got the floor. This is us. We do what we want here.
Cool.
This is the Black Factor, baby.
So I think just being that spokesperson. So like I was telling that other parent, she was able to get her son in his right grade, so he wasn't behind, and now he's like he's amazing. Like, he actually just came to the restaurant and surprised me. So I think what parents need to do. What was the first part of that question again?
What's the best way a parent can advocate for their
children?
What can they do to make sure that they're getting the best results from that instructor and from that school?
Right. So so you need to know your child, of course, and you need to know your child, and then be an active participant in your child's education. And advocating for them means letting the teachers know who you are, letting the principals know who you are, that you are active, in your child's life. A lot of times you don't see parents. You don't see parents all year. I was
going to get to that.
Until you take that cell phone.
Yeah.
Baby, you could call them all day for a missing assignment, but you take that cell phone. I know what I was going to say. Back to the basics. Oh my God. So many of us have gotten so far away, and that's why I'm old school. I know I'm young, but I'm so old school. And I feel like we learned best, that way. And we came out great and dynamic. I
Man.
know I did. And so I think that we just need to get, back to the basics. And I'm not just talking about, books and, things like that. But you remember doing projects,
Yep.
in
Yeah.
school. These kids don't get projects anymore. Let them explore. Let them, learn,
Yeah.
outside of a paper and a pencil. And, like we had projects
And trying to
every
prepare
other week.
for a
It
test.
seemed like
They teaching them
that
to the test.
that is my biggest pet peeve. It's like I said, in Illinois, yes, we had to teach, standards and things like that, but we could teach those standards however we saw fit. In Texas, it's almost like it's scripted. And I'm just like, these kids need projects. And then when I say projects, now they want to come up with this term project-based learning. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's always got to be some gimmick. But that's just like anything else. There's always got to be somebody who wants to put their name on something so that they can say they're the ones that came up with this and that sort of crap.
exactly.
So, what do you feel? Now, and let me say this: like I have a cousin who is an educator in Chicago, and the stories that he tells me sometimes, because he works in a pretty low income area, and my cousin is a person who loves to shop. He's a shopaholic, but he's the type, he goes into Goodwills and different things like that in the wintertime and buys coats. And he literally takes these coats and he has students that show up to school with no coat on, no socks, no underwear, all these type of things. He goes and he buys this stuff out of his pocket and gives it to these students. He's even taking food. He got in trouble for, like, kids, like they have the lunchroom or whatever, and those children might throw away an applesauce that's never been opened, or milk or something
And
that's
he
never
would
been
take
opened.
them and put
He'd
them in his
take them out of
office.
the trash and keep them. And they actually they got on him about it, and he said there's students who literally, like, I remember when the pandemic first started, there were people whose kids literally weren't eating because they weren't coming to school. And when you're dealing with that sort of distraction for a child, how difficult is it as an instructor to try and weed through that and be able to give them an education?
Extremely difficult. I had a food pantry in my office as an assistant principal. And, as a teacher, my students knew that they always had, we started a food pantry in the classroom because, and they knew that they could eat. We would eat snacks, all of that. It wasn't because I'm not getting ready to try to teach no child and they starving and hungry and they stomach growling. So that's all they hear.
Ain't that something?
Is they
Sitting there with
stomach
their
growling.
growling.
But that again goes back to parents. When I had my son, yeah, I was a young parent, right? But my auntie teased me before because she said, let me see James' bag because you always got snacks in there for him. Because when I sent my son somewhere, he had food, and I was ridiculed as a young parent, but I was raised by a mother, a grandmother, two grandmothers, two aunties, three aunties, who taught me, and cared about me and loved on me and made sure that, I was good. Right. So it goes into that it takes a village. And so we have gotten away from that. We don't have villages raising our kids anymore. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. So, but again, that goes back to parents not being there, and then teachers not caring. Not caring.
Well, so let me ask you this: what are your thoughts on the differences between the needs of a black male student versus a black female student, in regard to, or can they even be categorized that way? Do you see any differences that make it more difficult to educate one versus the other?
No, not really. You can categorize it because it's a different category. It's a male versus a female. That's a different category in and of itself. But females have, issues just as well as the males. Yeah. So, I mean, our black students have issues just, just on the strength that they black, some of them,
Right.
and they are in these neighborhoods, especially in Chicago, where it's segregated.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have, you have the back of the yards, you
Right.
have Inglewood, you have, you know, uh, up
Go from
north,
South Shore. You can go to
right.
you can go
You,
to Avalon. You can hit. Yeah.
Right,
It's
exactly. And so, that's a barrier and an issue in and of itself because of, where they may have been born and where they live, you know. Um I like that comment. People have fallen out of the tribe mentality.
yes,
You know
absolutely have.
that's so true.
So here you can get
Um
it too. There you go. Make it right.
um so I think that your girls have barriers. I don't know if you want me to talk about those barriers that the girls have versus what the boys have,
No, I
but
think you should. I mean, this is the whole purpose
so
of what we're doing is
right.
point
So
these things out.
females like the mentality, of females, especially in Chicago. I keep going back to
I know.
Chicago.
Well, you
'Cause
kind of have to. It has it does have it.
because
It has
it's-
its cultural differences.
It definitely does.
Specifically because of the segregation and separation that you talk about.
My gosh.
Yeah.
And the segregation and the way they're raised. I'm telling you, like, because I was raised by older people, like when I got out of school, I went to my auntie house. My auntie was probably 65, maybe 70 when I went over there. So my mother didn't pick me up from her house till 8, 9 o'clock every night. So was she raising me? Heck yeah, she was making sure I had food when I got out of school, making sure I sat at that table and got my lesson. Get your lesson done, So the kids don't have that all the time, nowadays. And that creates a barrier. These young men, when they walking home from school, or look at all of the ways that they being pulled.
Yeah, yeah. You got the gangs. You got the drug situation.
Exactly.
You got
So
a
yeah,
ton of
it's a difference, and it's a barrier for both of them.
So with in that same vein, and this is where I'm taking this at this point. I read a book some time ago, by a fellow by the name of Michael Porter. It's called "Kill Them Before They Grow."
Oh,
I recommend every parent, specifically parents and grandparents of young black males, to read this book. It's not a very long read; it's a very short book, but it is extremely powerful. Have you read that book before, Chris?
I have not, but I'm
This book is
looking at it. I'm like,
this
let me
book is
borrow
deep.
that so
And what
that
it
so I
talks
can go
about-
home and read that right
yeah,
now.
I'll make sure you take it. What it talks about specifically, and this is where I'm going with this line of questioning, is the process by which we end up with and I also wrote about it in my book, The Black Factor, where we talk about the school to prison pipeline. Dr. Umar Johnson talks about that an awful lot. It is the fail, the ability to fail young males, or to through some of these systems, through some of these different education systems, to dehumanize these young men to the point of failure, to the point of they'll never be good enough, where they don't see education as an option, and that whole thing, and so they end up inevitably on drugs or in the prison system by the psychological damage done to them at a very early age through the conditioning of the education system. Can you expound on that, or are you familiar with that?
So for me, I promise you, it goes back to parenting. For me,
Well, I agree with
everything
that, yeah.
goes back to parenting because I raised 2 boys, 2 males in Chicago. My oldest son saw 5 of his friends be murdered his
That's a lot.
senior year of high school. 5. My son still went to college.
Yeah, yeah.
you know, um, but so many of them, and you know, and that was at Urban Prep, a school that was designed to help bring our young black males out of this impoverished mindset, out of this gang-ridden mindset. But they still had 5 boys be murdered in one school year.
Ain't that something?
So, you know, I prayed over my son. I don't know. I think that helped because I was a praying mother.
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did.
So, you know, I think that no matter what these children encounter or what they're getting, if they have praying parents at home, parents that care, they can overcome everything else that's thrown at them. They can overcome the drug-ridden streets. They can overcome the gang wars. They can overcome. Now, that's not to say that all of them, because some people, you know, fall victim, and you can't help that. You know, but if you praying over your child, you got your holy oil, you are
You putting in work.
you know, yes, you putting in work, but that's a parent, right? You being a parent. So no matter what these kids are faced with in the streets,
right,
in the books at school, they have a parent at home that's telling them something different, that's teaching them something different, that's allowing them to overcome. So I don't know. I'm just a firm believer of, because I grew up in the heart of Chicago, in the ghetto. You know, I grew up on 55th, 57th and Elizabeth, 55th and Hamilton, 55th and Union, where you couldn't go from 55th to 54th. You couldn't go across that boulevard, okay, without getting shot at. And the McDonald's was over there. So we wanted to go to McDonald's. So we had to go all the way down to Halsted and then cross over, go right to McDonald's and go right back. Because you liable to have the fat boys coming through the alley shooting up.
right,
So, and I got my doctorate degree
right.
through all of that.
Now, you know, and I'm glad you said that, because like just as an example, you know, and my daughter, I am a proud father of 3 children who overcame or did not. I made it my business,
Right.
And it goes back to what you said earlier about the parents. See, we point fingers at these young people and we say, oh, look at them doing this and look at them doing that. And the fact is, whatever they are, they're our product. They're the leaf on the tree of our roots.
But not only do we point the finger at, you know, the kids, and we point the finger at the books, we point the finger at the teachers, we point the fingers at the school systems,
like you said earlier,
we point the finger at, you know, at everything, which goes back to your original question, all of the barriers that they face and all of this that they have in the books and all of that. Whose idea was it to send that child to that school that gave them that knowledge?
Man, exactly.
Who's
we spent a lot of money making sure that we lived in neighborhoods that allowed the best possible education for our kids, period.
And my thing is, we live in America. First of all, you could be anything you want to be in America.
That's true.
So I'm going to go back to this comedian. I can't think of her name. What's that comedian? She's a fairly new comedian. She was dating Common at one point. Tiffany Haddish.
Yeah.
She said you could be anything in America. You in America. You could be anything you want to be.
It's
so
true.
you could be white. Actually,
Now,
I can go right now and put on my application that I'm white.
Oh, I have advocated for that on this show.
I'm saying.
I told all black people from now on, don't ever put black on another application.
I mean, they identifying themselves as non-binary and all of this stuff nowadays.
Preach,
so why
preach.
can't
That's
I can put white on my application? I can be whatever I want to be. I live in America. So why is it that these kids over here are falling victim to the gangs, to the this, to the that, to the this, to the that, but my kids was right next to them?
Nah.
My kids played basketball with them.
Right.
But what was the difference? They had a mother that cared.
And in your case, nobody can say, what you wasn't no man in the house. Hey, you didn't have no man in the house and you got it done.
You know what I mean?
I mean, hell, my mother was a single mother. My father, when my mother divorced my father, hell, he divorced me too. So, it was on and cracking.
You see what I'm saying?
I was fortunate enough to have some male figures around me that was strong.
Exactly.
But the bottom line was my mother cared about where I ended up and
Exactly.
how I ended up. And so because of that, and a lot of people, I've had this sort of, I guess, argument, if you will, with people in the past, because when my kids were coming up, when they were young, you hear people say stuff. You don't know what they doing when they're not around you.
You don't.
Bet me I didn't know what they was doing when I wasn't around. Bet me money on that. I knew pretty much, and the reason I knew, not because I was prying into their business, but because I had an open door policy.
Right, where they could come.
They could tell me what was going on.
Exactly.
And I always told them, better for you to ask me to go somewhere
Then ask one of your friends, or you sneak and go.
now, and something happened. See, always be aware that if you don't worry about whether I'm gonna say no or yes, because you'll be surprised. I get it. I want you to enjoy your life. I want you to have fun. But if I see you get ready to do something stupid,
I'm gonna let you know.
I'm gonna pull your coat.
Right.
Now,
But
when
I
I
had that same policy, with my boys, with my daughter too. And I may not know everything, but I'm gonna know because they're eventually gonna tell me. And like my son and my nephew broke a wall in the house. And I didn't hear it. And so we was all downstairs, eating or whatever. And so my nephews came downstairs and they like looking all weird and funny, to my son, and my son waiting on his moment, to tell me what happened. And then my son just bust out, "Why you need to shut up? Because why wouldn't I tell my mama what happened? She gonna find out anyway."
And there you go. And as long as you have, and see, and as a parent, because like my oldest daughter, she's on this show often. It's funny, sometimes we're talking and she, she'll always say she was the experimental child. And it's true. We learned how to become parents.
We do.
On her. I mean,
ain't no book.
Right. So she got the trial and error, the trial and error parents.
Right.
But she turned out well. You understand that? And that, for me, my main goal was always to be sure that all of my children were raised together in the same house, and that they became productive, responsible, caring people.
Right.
Beyond that, I'm cool. And I'm lucky enough that I got some real productive, extremely smart kids. And I even had to, and I'm going to ask you this, Crystal, because this is an interesting thing. I've even had to tell my children at some point, never be apologetic for who you are. Never have to apologize because your parents did what they were supposed to do. Never apologize. Now, I'm saying that to say, we in some of these school systems, and I'm asking you, what about those students who literally are brilliant but dumb themselves down to fit in?
That's a tough one. Brilliant but dumb themselves down to fit in. I would tell them that they in the wrong crowd, because
it's easy to say though, because these people are attractive to them. They, I just the way I avoided that with my own children was that I made them understand that nobody in their school, none of their friends, was cooler than me. I know that sounds crazy, but like just as they say that a girl's first love is her father.
It's her father. Mm-hmm.
So I always made it where I gave it to them so that it made enough sense where, because like I would tell my kids, look, when it comes to certain things, if you don't feel like you can talk to me because you're afraid, which you should never be, because I'm not, it ain't gonna be like that. But if it ever come to a place where you got something on your chest and you got to get it off and it's important, find somebody that you at least know I respect. Find somebody that you know that will give you good information. I said, because your friends are just as dumb, if not dumber than you.
Then you
Don't
are,
ever ask
right.
them.
Don't ever ask your friends.
They can't help you.
I used to tell my kids that too, all the time. Your friends gonna give you advice at the same level that you on.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't you come and ask me, somebody that got way more experience and knowledge? Like, you don't have to be scared to ask me anything.
Exactly.
But I think, I don't know, when you asked that question, I kind of went back to, my childhood and, and the school, that I went to. And I haven't experienced that, with my kids. My kids always sat back And even the teachers would tell me, your kids they just don't care. Somebody could be falling out of their chair and everybody else around them laughing, ha, and my son would just be sitting there like, that got to be the biggest dummy ever. Like, so my kids always felt like they didn't have to fit in, with nobody. They can be, standoffish and be happy, because I always taught them to be themselves.
And that's exactly what we did.
And as a teacher, what I would tell, my students when I encountered, things like that, you just tell yourself that you're the smartest person in the room. It don't matter what somebody else think about you. You are the smartest person in the room. Right. You don't need, and so that's what I always told, my students. You don't need to care about what somebody else think, because, if nobody else thinks highly of yourself, you have to.
We have a question from Where the Whiskey Flows is the name on the YouTube channel. He wants to know, how does Chicago's segregation impact the teachers and the students?
Oh, so
good question.
That is a really, really, really good question. I think it from a teacher standpoint, it impacts my mentality and my thought process. It makes me want to go harder.
Do the teachers deal with
segregation? Yes.
Segregation and the racism in that system?
Absolutely, because that in Chicago, they have quotas.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is
so
that right?
Yes. So let's just say I wanted to go teach at a school in Chicago, but they already had too many blacks.
Really? Is that right?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
With Chicago Teachers Union and all of that?
They have a quota. You hear me?
Wow,
it can only be a certain
that.
Percentage. Yes, it's a certain percentage of each nationality that they can have in the school. So, I don't know the numbers, but back then, and I'm not sure if it's still that way, right? Because I haven't been there in 6 years.
The fact that it was that way at all, I think is an issue.
My mother can tell you about that, because my mother worked at Chicago Public Schools, downtown at Central Office.
Okay.
And my mother worked there for over 20 plus years. So yes, it was this was when, they used to send teachers. So at one point, all of the teachers would go to Central Office and apply for their jobs, and then there was an office in Central Office that would send the teachers out to certain schools. And then it became where, you would just go like to the job fair or whatever and meet the principals, and then the principals would have the right to hire basically whoever they wanted to, hire, or whoever they needed to. But yes, absolutely. So that definitely affects, teachers, because, if you go to a school up north, that's where you really want to work. You could be told, well, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and hire you, not because you're a good teacher, but because you meet the criteria. You meet the criteria that I need, and I need to meet my quota.
That's crazy.
Because I need 32% at least African American teachers in my school, or 62%, or whatever the numbers are. But yes, absolutely, that is definitely a thing in Chicago.
That's crazy. So let me ask you, in your experience, and you've worked in multiple states as an educator, here in Texas in the position of principal. Have you had any experience with the differences between treatment and expectation where race is concerned with students? Tell it on the mountain.
So I don't know if you know that this is a thing too, right?
Yeah, I'm learning.
But you do know that okay, on the standardized test,
right,
there is an expectation of pass and fail rate.
Okay.
So, Asian students are expected to pass at a certain percent, a higher percent. So it's like 67% of Asian Americans are projected or expected to pass this exam at this percentage. And the percentage of African Americans is like 23%.
Really?
Oh yeah. They had. I wish I had known you was gonna ask that question because I would have pulled up all of the data. Okay, I would have pulled up. But you can go on TEA right now and pull it up, and they will show you
What
the
is
statistic.
TEA?
The Texas Education Administration or Association.
Okay.
Yeah, TEA. That's who governs the testing for Texas.
But now Texas, to me, I'd like for you to speak on the differences between the education systems from state to state. But Texas, to me, already has a lot of issues. Particularly at one point, they were trying to include in the text of history books that slaves were. What did they refer to them as? Not slaves, but immigrants, migrant workers.
Oh my gosh.
They were that was something they were literally putting in their books. So from state to state, what are some of the differences that you see and the similarities also?
I feel like Texas is more boxed in and closed in, and they teach straight from a text or a book, and don't really allow
No creativity in the system.
Yeah, and that was my biggest issue, is that if I'm a teacher, let me teach.
Do they treat, since we have such a large Hispanic community in Texas, are they the sort of blacks of the system in Chicago?
Yes.
In Texas?
Yeah. So the Hispanics definitely are the majority minority.
Majority minority.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I mean, to think anything else is a gaslight. And the funny thing is, when you point these things out or you attempt to point out these differences, let me ask you this. Do you feel that, I already know the answer, but I'm gonna put this rhetorical question out here anyway. Do you feel that the education system is separate but equal? I know. I had to ask.
You said, is it separate?
Is it separate? But like Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal.
No,
it's a separated system, but
it's
has
separate
equal.
and unequal. What you mean? Separate but equal? Like, that don't even make sense to me. Like, no, it's not equal. Are you kidding me?
I know. I'm just,
What is completely unequal, unethical, on everything that you can name on to? No. Oh my gosh.
So, Dr. Umar Johnson, he says that learning disability diagnoses are weaponized against black children. Is this something you've seen firsthand, and can you speak on your professional opinion about that?
I don't necessarily agree with that 100%, because if a student has a disability, I think that, especially from what I've seen, in Texas, well, not even just in Texas, but in Illinois as well, that if a student has a disability, they actually are given help, and they're given support. And I think that people often say don't label that child, or don't label, and I kind of don't agree with that either, because I feel like that provides extra help and extra support. So if a label is going to provide this student with a magnifying glass that they need to use to read their book, why not give them that support? If labeling them is going to provide them with extra help, extra support outside of the classroom, why not give them that support?
Okay, but now, while you are correct, I think that the weaponization of that disability comes further down the road, when that being a part of their record.
But I don't agree with that, because the reason I don't agree with that is because why is that a problem that it's on their record? Why is that a problem?
When I go to society we live in.
No, but when so let's just say I'm dyslexic, right?
Okay.
And I got diagnosed with dyslexia, right? And that's on my record that I have dyslexia. A college is not going to say, no, we can't let her in because she has dyslexia. That's illegal. And they don't do that. They let you in because you have dyslexia and they want to support you. And if they denied you, they going to get in trouble.
So you're saying that you should be able to use that as a way to take advantage.
Yeah, a stepping stone. Yes, absolutely. I don't think that is a crutch of any sort. I don't think that is a hindrance of any sort. I actually think that that's a plus. Label me. Okay. Because that's gonna give me some help, the help that I need. Now, I disagree, with that. I do. Because I think that it provides help. I have not seen, I was in education 17 years. Mm-hmm. And I went through education. I went through, school to the highest degree. So I went through graduate level college.
Right.
So I don't think that it has ever hurt a student. I haven't seen it.
Okay.
It may have, but I haven't seen it. Not to me.
Okay. Well, you've enlightened me. I've learned some things this evening. So let me, Crystal, I want you to give your overview as we close out and tell people with school-age children something very important, whatever that is that they should know that's going to benefit their children and their education for the future.
Oh. So
much, right?
That is, I almost want you to repeat that question. But no,
tell the people something good for their kids when they grow up.
So they
even in school.
Yeah, to be a support system for your child, to be that advocate. I mean, I know I've already said that several times.
Go to PTA meetings.
But go to PTA meetings. Let the teachers know who you are.
Show up.
Let your students know that you are there to support them, and not being an absent parent or in the background.
That was one of the reasons my kids actually did so well in school, because I made it my business
to let people know who you are.
I told every one of their teachers, if they so much as crack out a turn once, call me.
Absolutely.
And my kids knew that was the last thing that anybody wanted, so they never got out of line. I never got one of those calls.
I know, right? I used to tell my kids, you act up at home. You don't act up where I can't discipline you, because nobody else had permission to beat you. Not no teacher, not like when I was a kid, the paddle was called Mr. Brown, right? But in my kids' day, they wasn't allowed to beat the kids anymore, with Mr. Brown. Right. So I would tell my kids, right, exactly. So I would tell my kids, you act up at home, because at home, I could beat you. But at home. I could beat you at home. Right, I could beat you at home. That's but funny. You can't act up at school. So my kids never, acted up. But I think that just parents need to really be advocates for their students and know that, or let their students know.
Hold on. Earlier you said something about, making sure we hold the teachers accountable. What about them students? Them ones that is always cutting up sideways, and then the parents always taking the child's side, even though their child is the worst terror in the school. What about them?
That's difficult. That is difficult, but I think
we know they're there.
I think that at the end of the day, I've had difficult students in my classroom, right? That were terrors. But one statement that I heard that was so significant to me was a child or a person, period. Okay? A person doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Yeah. So I think those students that act up, they don't know that you care. And that's with anybody. They don't know that their parents care. They don't know that, that their teachers care. When you really get down to the meat of why these kids are acting up, that behavior begins to change. That behavior begins to change.
It starts at home.
And it definitely starts at home. But I've seen that firsthand, that that kids will change when they know you care. They will. Because they're acting out for attention.
No, that's true.
They acting out for attention.
Let me ask you something. During your education, during your time working toward becoming an educator, with all of the degrees and things that you have, did you all do any kind of learning in terms of psychology or any of that? Does any of that come with that education?
Yeah, you have to take a psychology class, but typically the psychology class is right in the beginning. I remember having a psychology class, in like my freshman year of college, of undergrad, and I think I had one other psychology class in my master's program, but the meat of it came from my bachelor's.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and experience. Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. Well, shoot, Crystal. Listen. I'm sorry, Dr. Cross.
It's okay.
Crystal Cross. Look, I appreciate you coming in tonight and kicking it with us and talking about your background and your experience in education. I hope that someone in my audience was able to gain, learn, pick up some things along the way, and do this thing, man. This is because we don't have enough, in my opinion. We don't spend enough time and put enough emphasis on education. I have a very good friend who, and I know I said we're gonna close out, but I got a couple of things right quick. I have a friend who she's like a niece to me, and she just had a baby, and we were talking the other day, and she was talking to me about the different, just asking me things, because I've raised my children, and I told her, I said one thing I want you to do, because she's a toddler. I said, I want you to start buying her books. I want you to give her books. I'm going to send her books. I said, I want you to make books playtime. I want you to make her feel like when she has a book, she's playing and doing her thing. I want you to make reading fun. Make it so that as she grows, she will want nothing but books. My oldest daughter had an extensive library. She has an extensive library now, and she pays sometimes an exorbitant amount of money for books because she loves to read so much, and that came from that same sort of, and she's extremely knowledgeable. For those of you who may be new to this show, she often helps me host, and she comes on here, and her knowledge is extensive, and I learn a lot from my own child, so I'm happy to be able to say that. But that whole book thing and that whole learning process is extremely important. As a matter of fact, Miss Cozy just popped on, my girl Sharon. That's her mother, as a matter of fact. But I was telling her about teaching the baby to start learning, start reading early, make that a fun activity, and she'll grow up to love reading, and that'll make a huge difference in her education.
My daughter didn't know who Beyonce was, and my daughter's 13 now. Okay, and she may know who she is now because she's come of age, but my daughter didn't listen to secular music at all. She loved books. Both of my children, all of them, had libraries in their rooms, because I think that is very, very, very important for students to, right, or for kids, for our kids, I'm talking students,
especially now, because they get everything in bits and pieces off of TikTok and Facebook.
Right, they always in these phones. Like as a little bitty baby, it's like I heard a parent say this baby was like 5 or 6 months old, and they were like, "Oh, she loves, like, I don't know, cocoa melon or something." And I'm like, at 5 months, how she know about cocoa melon?
I don't even know what cocoa melon is. What is it?
It's one of them cartoon things.
It's a cartoon thing on the phone.
Yeah.
So, see, that's, yeah. And, even though now on the flip side of that, because my son and I, well, here's what happened. I was against video games. Like I look at grown men who sit around
and play video games.
It amazes me.
They making money off of that now, though.
Well, this is exactly where I'm going with this. And my daughter likes to say, the mixtape crowd. She says, like, all the men, they just want to make mixtapes. So, but here's the funny thing about that. Like all things, because I didn't like rap music when it first started. I was like, that ain't gonna last. Who knew, right? So, with the game thing, it has finally, but see, here we are 20, 30 years later, it has turned into a money making operation. Like literally, you can make money playing games. As a matter of fact, we did a show earlier this year where we talked about the metaverse and the different metaverses.
Check your text messages.
Decentraland and Sandbox and some of the
Go
others.
open the front door.
And literally, each one of them, you can go into those games and play games and earn cryptocurrency. You can literally play casino games. You can play roulette. You can play and make money. And it is the most insane thing for me to see them doing this. But people are making money playing games.
They making money off of everything, even this
TikTok
stuff.
This is what I told my son, though. Now, I'm going to show you. I told him, I said, let me explain something to you. Because I wouldn't buy him a video game. Now, he went to Chicago one summer to kick it with his grandma, and she bought him a video game. So, needless to say, I was mad about that. But then, as he began to play it more, and when he was back at home, I said, let me explain something to you. If you want to play this game, son, I'm going to have to ask you to learn how to make them. I'm going to have to ask you
now that's a good one.
to learn how this game works. And he did. And he is now currently an animator, and he is in school getting his degree in animation and video gaming. He literally now knows how to create and make these games. So that, for me, is a plus. That's a good thing. So he's doing that, and I'm happy that he's doing it. And I'm looking forward to seeing his first actual complete game, because he sent me animations and things that he's made, and I think it's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
So he's
but
doing what I asked him
that's
to do.
amazing, because these kids are doing everything.
He's
on
trying
these
to get
games.
he's trying to get an internship with Pixar right now.
Oh, that'd be
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly.
Yes.
So yeah, and but these, again, I mean, anything that we consider negative can be turned into a positive. So it has turned into a positive for him. So now for him to play game, he literally, like, he plays some games, but it's almost boring to him now
because he's creating them, so his mind
he's
is
looking
always.
at it. His analytical mind is
Right.
looking at it differently now
Yep.
than a person just sitting there clicking buttons
Exactly.
and not getting paid to do it, because it's a lot more of them than it is the ones getting paid. So anyway, you're gonna hustle. So all right, I'm not gonna go down any more rabbit holes.
We could do this all night, right?
Yes,
we could do that when you
that's
know
the beauty of the Black Factory.
you know what, and when you passionate about something, you could talk about it all day, and that's what I say all the time. Like I mean, I can free flow all of this all day because I'm passionate about
your passion in what you're doing, because there needs to be more educators who have that passion. There are some, but there are more, unfortunately, who have other agendas, and it doesn't include the betterment of these children.
But you know what? That just popped in my head when you said that, is everything starts from the top, right?
Yep.
So if you drive past somebody's house and you see that the yard is unkept, or the house doesn't look the yard doesn't look kept, right? The first person you think about is the owner. Right? The owner of the house. Not upkeeping, not the owner. You don't think about the other people that live there. You don't think about the kids that's living in there or anybody else. You think about the owner, right? So a lot of things, just like with parenting, when we talk about all of the other things that's going on with the kids and everything that they have to endure and this and that, we bring it back to the parents, right? Because they're the owners of those kids, right?
Right.
So in education, it starts from the top. Right.
So if those students don't produce, then you look at the teacher and say, okay.
But then if you don't have a good teacher
Right.
in classroom,
I get that.
who you look at?
It's funny you say that, because one of my oldest daughter actually had a teacher starting out. I believe it was kindergarten. That lady was horrible.
See?
She was terrible.
And so
it
you
did
think
affect her. It did absolutely affect her moving forward.
And you think about, well, who hired this teacher? Why is this teacher there? Who interviewed this teacher? Okay, and then if you have an ineffective principal who actually interviewed this teacher who didn't care, who's the owner or the boss of the principal?
Right.
And then who's in charge of them? So it actually all starts
down.
to trickle down. But the people that you have at the top, these people, in my opinion, they don't really care. They don't really care. They got their position politically.
Collecting that check.
You know, and it's all becomes political at that point.
So now the children become
Suffer,
pawns
right?
in the game of chess
Right.
that they're playing to
Exactly.
advance
And so that's the
themselves.
biggest issue, you know, with the education system is that the people at the top, because everything starts at the top.
That's very unfortunate.
Everything starts at the top, and so at the top, you got these people that don't care.
Well, we know you care, and that's what matters, because we need more of you. We need more Dr. Crystal Crosses in the world. Crystal Cross, you understand me, Crystal Cross? So
I
now
understand.
I'm gonna wear that out. I'm gonna wear it out. I'm telling you now. When I see you, next time you see me, I'm gonna come around and be like, Crystal Cross. Uh-oh, we got a question from the peanut gallery. What you got?
I wanted to ask this one question. Did y'all discuss the schools in Mississippi? Because I know you worked in Mississippi.
Schools in Mississippi.
I know she worked in Mississippi.
Oh, you did some time in Mississippi, huh?
So it sounded bad.
I did.
Hey, education system like prison system.
I
Jack.
did one school year
Okay.
Really?
in
How was that?
Mississippi. It was different.
Oh.
They feed those kids good though. I tell you that.
So they get that good down south.
They get good food in Mississippi, and you know what else? They can't eat at lunch. No, the kids can't talk when
they
they
can't talk when they eat. Really? No talking.
no talking. They don't
Wow.
eat. They sit there and eat their food quiet, and they have good food. They
That's
fry.
why they
That's
quiet.
not
The
healthy.
food good.
They
No,
they
the food good. They gonna be quiet. They gonna eat. They're like, this food good.
they fry catfish in a deep fryer.
Really?
Yeah. Ooh, baby.
That's why everybody big in Mississippi. That's where everybody thick.
They
And them
have
country corn-fed girls down there.
Mhm. Yes, indeed,
grow
as
'em
they
up-
say.
they grow
Yes,
'em up right.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
That's
But
funny.
they feed them good. Oh, them kids don't go hungry at those schools in Mississippi, baby. They have real cooks.
That's
But do
funny.
you get to be creative with the education? You have to follow a book or
Yeah, how's the structure?
It was a little scripted, but once I got acclimated to it, I found that some of the techniques I took with me back home to
Okay.
Illinois. So it was a little different, but part of the reason is because Mississippi has a high turnover rate of students because
Really?
so the students move around a lot, and
Transit.
so and
those that not
so
stable families?
right. And so one of the things that the school system there prides itself on is that if a student leaves this school and goes to another school in a different area, they will still be getting the same education.
That's good.
So that was one thing
So they
that
won't be behind if they transfer. They won't be ahead if they transfer. that kind of
exactly.
thing. Okay.
So Mississippi actually gave you an actual outline. They called it a pacing guide. And so this week you should be teaching X, Y, and Z. So they didn't really structure it on exactly what you had to teach on that subject, but you should be teaching subject and predicate April 8th through April 15th.
Dig that. Well, you know, it's funny you say that too, because I remember when we moved here to Texas, our son was in his middle of his junior year, and when he came here and he started school we were in Marietta. We lived in Marietta, Georgia, right outside Atlanta. And when we came here, and my son was actually way ahead, and it kind of made him laugh because he was like, "Wow." He was like, "I know all this stuff already," and I was like, "Well, good.
Right.
That means you'll be able to get out of here pretty quick." But yeah, so I don't know. I guess when you moving around, it does matter, and yeah, so I can see that. Well, that's going to conclude this interview.
That was a good conversation. at the end,
I
too.
appreciate it was, and you know what? But this is what we do at the Black Factory.
Right.
This is how we get out, and I want to thank you so very much for taking your time out to come and chop it up with us and give us some information and all of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, give Crystal a hand. Let her know we appreciate her. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Chris Cross. You Chris Cross from now on.
No problem. I like it.
But look, Black Factor family, I want to thank everybody for coming and tuning in and hanging out with me. And y'all know what it is. Every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central. Don't forget to hit those share buttons. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the button that's got the button on it. You know what I'm talking about? Because we need as many people tuning in and checking us out as possible. And I hope everybody was able to gain something or get something from this show, like always. And I just want to say thank you all. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend. We appreciate you. And have y'all selves a wonderful, wonderful night. Deuces.